Good day, everybody. For those that are here, thank you so much for joining us today. In this webinar, we're going to talk about the best practices with Pluto LMS reporting. Today is the 15th of September, 2021. My name is Ian Faree, founder of Pluto LMS. There may be a few people still joining us. I'm sure they'll join us throughout the call. But for those that are here, thank you so much for being on time. And we're just going to dive straight into it. So talking about the agenda for today, so we're going to look at site-wide reports, we're going to look at course-specific reports, then we'll do a bit of a deep dive on custom reporting, and then finally at the end we're going to have a Q&A session. So if you have questions, you're welcome to pop it into the chat and we'll get to that at the end of the session. Great, so starting on site reports, some of the out-the-box reports that Pluto LMS has and that we'll discuss in this webinar are machine learning models, site logs, 360 overview, event monitoring, spam cleaner, as well as XAPI, otherwise known as Experience API. So what I'm going to do is do a deep dive on all of those, and we'll cover that in better detail. So what are site reports? So within Pluto LMS, you've got various types of reports. A site-wide report is something that you access via the site admin. So when you click on site admin and you go to reports, these are the reports that you will see at a site-wide level. So the benefit of that is it's going to give you an overview of what's happening across your site, and it will allow you quick access to get that information. Course reports, which we'll discuss later, are different. Those reports are only accessible via your courses. So with site reports, starting with the machine learning models, this is an incredibly powerful tool within Pluto LMS. And the way to access that is we're going to head over to site admin, click on reports, and then we're going to click on machine learning models. So why this is so powerful is it's going to give you these out-the-box machine models, and what this gives you is information based on the activity on your LMS. So for example, we can look at courses at the risk of not starting, students at the risk of dropping out, and there are other out-the-box reports. We are building this over time, and in the future we'll give you the ability to build your own analytics models. So we are working on that. So this is really useful because, for example, if we want to understand which students need help, this model is going to let us know which students need help based on a certain criteria. For example, they're not logging in, they're not viewing activities, they're not passing their quizzes, for example. The system will learn that and then generate insights for you. So just looking at courses at the risk of not starting, if you want to view the insights report for that, you can click on actions followed by insight report. And then what this is going to give you is a basic overview as a chart. It's going to give you a table, and then through this you can actually understand what is going on within your system. So each report will have its own insight report. You can accept these, reject these, and over time the system will learn what is useful to you. And then by learning what is useful, it will then notify you accordingly so that you can get the right information at the right time. So that's the machine learning models as an overview, powerful applications to give you good insight to what's happening and the automation that comes with it over time to really improve your learning experiences. Next, we're going to talk about site logs. So what are site logs? To give you an example, what we're going to do is head over to site admin, click on reports, and then click on site logs. So what this is going to give you is a table of various logs. So what this will give you is the time at which the event happened, which user it was, which user was affected, the event context. So, was it applicable at a course? Was it applicable at a site-wide level, etc.? What actually happened? And then it will give you a description as well as an IP address for the actual event. So this becomes useful if, let's say, using an example, you employ a contractor to develop courses and content for you, and you can actually track what they're doing. So this will track everything from the clicks to when they logged in, to when they were logged out, to if they're an enrolled-in user, to when they created a new activity. So you can think of this like an audit table or an audit log. So at any time, if anything, you want to do a bit of a deep dive and do some research into what happened on your LMS, because let's say someone accidentally unenrolled a user, or let's say they deleted an activity within a course. You can come to these logs and view who did it, not to sort of signal them out, but more so to just backtrack and actually correct the mistake. So there is a recycling bin on Pluto LMS if someone deletes an activity, for example, and then you can just go in and restore that activity that was perhaps deleted. Or let's say a user unenrolled someone from a course, you can see who it was and then maybe let them know next time that that's not the correct protocol within your LMS environment, for example. So these logs become quite useful for auditing purposes, and of course you can filter them as well. What's really nice is you can also export this data to CSV. So we've covered a lot of the information here because a lot of this does contain IP addresses, etc. But you can download this information from your LMS, get it into Excel or Google Sheets, and then even do a further analysis, and you can even create your own reports from this. Great, so moving on to the 360 overview site report. The way to access the 360 overview report is to go to site admin, click on reports, and then we're going to click on 360 overview. So this is really useful. We'll just show you some sample data over here. You can see everything from active users, course enrollment, course completion rates. It will show you the chart. You can decide the period that you're looking at. So in the last week, and this is just a demo site, but there was one active user. Obviously, if you have thousands of users, this chart will be different. You can see everything from course enrollments, completion rates, etc. Then we've got the course progress report over here. We'll do a bit of a deeper dive in this in a couple of minutes, but you can choose your course, see the progress, and then do some deep dives and export this information. Moving on to popular courses. So, you can decide and rank these based on enrollments, or if visits are more important to you, or completions, you can see which courses rank the highest. For example, by number of enrollments, we can see that this course is the most popular purely based on number of enrollments. Then you've got a certificate statistics overview. So really what this is going to give you is all of the certificates on your platform, which course they belong to, how many have been issued, and how many have not been issued by the number of students in that particular course. As mentioned, all of this is exportable, as you can see over here. You can also see real-time users. So perhaps you just want to see how many students are in the platform right now. There might be 10 students or 100 students that have logged in right now. You can see that list over here. And then really useful is the site access information report. So over time, as your LMS becomes more popular and more users are logging in and using it, you can see at which time of day your site is most active. So this becomes useful if you are running live courses, or if you want to post a message at the right time. This will generate a heat map for you, and you can see when's the best time to post, for example. Then you can view daily activities such as enrollments, activity completion, course completion, new registration visits. That's quite useful. You can see it by the hour. And then finally, we've got an inactive user list, so you can filter by the period. So before 3 months, basically what this is saying is these users have not logged in within the past 3 months. So you can have a look at that, see which users you might want to reach out to, and then contact them to get them back into your LMS system. So you can filter by the period as well. So as I mentioned, all of these you can do deeper dives into. We're going to use the course progress as an example here. So I want to view a particular course. I'm going to select this course. You can use the drop-down menu to select the course you want to have a look at. You can see their completion. So this is based on certain percentages. You can also hover over this pie chart over here to get more information. And as mentioned, these reports are exportable, and you can export them in various formats. You can export them to CSV, Excel, PDF, and you can even schedule an email. And I'll show you how to do that in a bit. And then finally, if you want to do a deep dive, if you click on more, it'll take you to this page. So by default, you'll see all of the users, but you can also select particular branches if you just want to see particular students that belong to a particular branch. You can do that as well. And then you can see the course progress. So these numbers are interactive. So when you click on them, it will show you the list of users that, for example, are enrolled or have completed the course, or you can see by progress as well. And you can also view course engagement. And then finally, on the 360 overview, really useful tool is this email symbol over here. This will give you the ability to actually schedule some of these reports. So when you click on that, it's going to take you to this page over here. You can then enter the details. So you might want to give the schedule a name, the recipient who's going to receive it. So in other words, the email address, the subject of that email. You can send them a message, and then you can send this to them on a daily basis with the latest information. You can choose weekly, monthly, etc., and a specific time, which is really useful. And then of course you can proceed to schedule that. Great, so next we are going to move on to event monitoring. So how do we access event monitoring? We're going to click on Site Admin, followed by Reports, and then Event Monitoring. So we've got some out-the-box events that are being monitored. We are building more over time, but some things that you can sort of track is when courses get created, when there's a new user that logs in or gets created on your system rather, and as well as when a user gets enrolled into a course. So you are not subscribed to these by default, but you can go in and change the settings for these by clicking on the gear icon. So for example, if we're looking at course created, perhaps you want to know every time a new course is created on your LMS. You can give it a description. You can give it a notification threshold in minutes as well. So effectively what this is going to do is within a minute of a course being created, you're going to get a notification. And you can actually customize that notification as well, which lands in your email inbox. So once you've customized the message and set up the notification, you need to subscribe to it if you want to receive it. So if we click on event monitoring, as you see over here, you can click on the plus icon for whichever event you want to subscribe to. As we said, we are building more in the future, and eventually you'll be able to create your own events that you would like to monitor. So this is how it is at the moment. Really useful if you just want to keep up to date with what's happening on your system without needing to actually log in. Great. Next, we're going to move on to the spam cleaner. So the spam cleaner is accessible from the same area. You're going to head over to Site Admin, Reports, click on Spam Cleaner. And really what this is in a nutshell is this is often popular. Let's say you are teaching primary or high school students, or even university students, or even staff. You will be able to track certain words via the messaging tool on your system, because you don't want high schoolers messaging horrible things to one another. You can track certain words, search for these words, and then pick it up in the system to help prevent students from messaging one another, and you can auto detect these patterns. You can also customize the list of these spam words. So if you have particular words that you want to trigger and learn from who's messaging one another, maybe within your organization you want to track a certain word, etc., you can do that, so long as your privacy and they accept the privacy, your users accept your privacy policy around this. So then you can auto detect the common spam patterns and it will generate a list for you. Great. Then finally, on the site reports, we're going to talk about the Experience or X API. So the X API is accessible in a different area just to get it set up. So we can click on Site Admin, Integrations, and then Log Store Setup. The reason why it's over here is because it's not actually a report that sits inside of your LMS system. It's actually an integration. So you are going to be sending logs, and we covered this in a separate webinar. So be sure to watch that in our separate webinar. It was in our integration series. You're effectively going to be able to send logs to an external log store. in order to generate these reports. So the other webinar covers it in more detail, but the report that you get from this sits in an external system. So this way you can see, for example, session time versus course completions, is there a correlation between the two, etc. So we covered this in another webinar, so we're not going to dive too deep here. Perfect. Now moving on to course reports. So some of the standard reports that we offer within Pluto LMS at a course level is being able to track the user progress, seeing how much time they're spending in your course. You can also view activity reports, and finally the gradebook. We won't cover the gradebook and all of the activity reports in this webinar for the purposes of time. This will be covered in a future webinar. We'll just cover user progress, time spent, and a sample of an activity report today. So what are course reports? Course reports are different to site reports in that if you're creating a course, let's call it course A, you might assign a course editor to that course. You can also assign a course reporter to that course. Those users will only see the reports for that particular course, and these reports are only accessible via that course. So these are course-specific reports. And what is the benefit of this? Well, you can split your information by course. And again, you might not want a course editor to see your site-wide reports. Perhaps you don't want them to see your user logs, for example. You just want them to see the user progress. So the user within that course will only see the course's reports that are applicable to them. So that's really the benefit of that. So the first course report we're going to dive into is user progress. So if you log into your LMS, you click on your course, what you're going to do is click on the course admin button, and then followed by a course administration and course completion. So before you start reporting and before you start seeing user progress, it's often a good idea to first define how the course is completed. So that's why we're going through this step first. So there are a number of ways you can actually complete a course within Pluto LMS. It can be based on the activities that they complete. It could be the completion of other courses. It could be by date, enrollment duration, unenrollment, course grade, self-completion, and completion by others. So there's a whole range of options over here. You can leave this by default, but it's often a good idea just to define this yourself so that you're satisfied with the course completion settings. That's by hitting this button over here. Next, what is useful is to define how activities are completed. So before you begin adding content, etc., you can define the default activity completion. So, let's use an assignment, for example. We're going to hit the edit button by selecting the assignment. And typically, for an assignment, what you want to have is a condition. So for this particular assignment, I want to say when the student views it and when they submit the assignment, that is when it will be marked complete. That's the default setting. You can change this by individual assignments within your course, but this is just setting up your defaults for your course. So every time you create a new assignment, these will be the defaults for you. Then when you save changes, that rule will kick in. Now, let's say you didn't do this and you need to go back and redefine your completion settings. There is a way and a quicker way to do this. So you can click on the bulk edit activity completion. So you can click, for example, pages. Let's say you select these 2 pages plus a page over here. And previously you had it set to manually completing it, but this time you actually want the student to view the activity in order to complete it. So you can select those pages, click on the edit button, and then change the conditions of completion. You can do this for quizzes, assignments, all of the activities within your course in bulk. So that's really useful. Now that you've set up the conditions for completions, the report that you see, now you've enrolled your students, the students have gone through your course content, then the report will start to populate for you. So to view the completion progress, you're going to open the sidebar over here, and then you're going to click on Overview of Students. And what this will give you is an overview and the percentage progress of all the students within your course. You can even create groups for them and filter by groups. Let's say you have various departments within your company. You can create groups for them and then filter by those groups. Let's say it's based on the department that they're assigned to, or the workforce that they are working for, or the company position, like a manager, for example. You can filter them by groups, and you can even filter by role. So maybe you only want to look at the members, let's say the staff members within your organization. So when you hover over these, you can see exactly which activities were complete and that was not complete. And then you can also see the percentage progress of all of these users. What is quite nice, if you head over to course admin, reports, and then course completion, you're going to get the ability to then download that data to a CSV, and you can report on that externally if required. The next course report we're going to dive into is time spent. So on the right hand side, on that right panel, you're going to open it, and then there's a block over here called course time. When you say view time spent, it's going to give you the time spent within your particular course. What's really nice about this is you can define a start and an end period. So let's say you only need to track it for a given month, or you want to know it from the beginning of time up until a certain date, etc. You can define that period or leave it as default to see everything. Then you can also limit between clicks. So in other words, the system is smart enough to not track time if the student is not actually clicking in the platform. So that's really useful when, let's say, a student has logged into your course, but they don't log out. They get up, have lunch, come back, and then continue working. It will not track that time that they were on lunch because of your definition of between clicks. So it will only track actual time spent in the course where they are engaging with your content, they're viewing videos, they're clicking on content, they're completing quizzes, etc. So the system is smart enough to only track time spent in a productive manner. What's really nice is it will generate a table for you, and then you can even download this to Excel for any external reporting. Then we're going to look at activity reports at a course level. So as mentioned, we will cover more activity reports as well as the gradebook in a separate webinar. But for the purposes of time, what I'm going to show you is a sample of the gradebook and then what you can do with SCORM reporting. So if you click on grades within your course, you'll see the gradebook, a list of students that have enrolled into your course, as well as all of the activities that have applicable grades to them. Obviously, if the students haven't completed them yet, you won't see any data here. But if a student does complete something, you'll see their grade, as you see over here. So this is the SCORM package example that we have. In order to view the SCORM reports, you're going to click on the magnifying glass as indicated over here. So what's really nice about this is you can see a basic report, a graph report, an interactions report, as well as an objectives report, and the list of students enrolled into that course that have access to the SCORM file. You can click on attempt, so you can view the attempt in more detail. And of course, when they started the SCORM file, when they last accessed it, and the score that they obtained. So if you have hundreds of students, you can also download this report in the form of an Excel sheet, for example, which is really useful. And that gives you the ability to do so over there. So looking at a graph report, just as an example, it can show you, which users have completed 50% of the SCORM package, which users are fully complete. And when you hover over these, you'll get more information. At the bottom, you can also click on show chart data to see the underlying data within these reports. You can also look at the responses, which is really useful. So if you want to see the response for the particular student, what they submitted within that SCORM file, you can do so, and this is also exportable to Excel. Great. So Going on to custom reports, this is a new feature that we have within Pluto LMS, and we're constantly building this out. But just to give you an example of custom reports, I'm going to cover this in a webinar. I'm also going to go through a live example so that you can see how it works. So starting from the basics, what is a custom report? Well, if any of the reports that you saw in this webinar don't quite meet your requirements, Pluto LMS gives you the ability to build your own reports. And that's really useful if you have any bespoke needs and you need to pull various information in the form of a table and export that, etc. We do have the ability for you to build your own reports. So that's really beneficial because you can build any report you require and you're not limited to our standard reporting. So to access custom reports, what you're going to do is click on Site Admin, then you're going to click on Reports, followed by Custom Reports. Then there will be some out-the-box reports available to you that you can use as sample data and sample SQL queries. But to add a report, you're going to hit Add Report as shown over here. And then it's going to prompt you for a name of the report. So maybe you want to track completion progress that has a certain criteria, you can do so. You can give that report a summary just so that the person who is viewing the report knows what information it contains, or perhaps any instructions that you may need to give them. You can input that over here. You can choose your export options. So typically CSV is the most popular, so you can tick CSV and then click on Add. So once you've added the report, it's going to prompt you for a custom SQL query. Now, what I'm going to do is jump into a live example just to chat through this, to explain how it works. It may seem daunting at first. The reason why we're using the methodology of SQL queries because it really does give you the complete freedom to generate any report you wish. And we do provide you with full access to your LMS database. We give you sample tables, and I'll go through that in a bit in the live example. So you can actually query data out of your LMS, generate the reports that you need, add filters, etc. So without further ado, let me dive into a live example. I want to go through the basics and break this down. So within SQL, you've really got to start with a select query. If you're confused by all of this, let me just dive out of here for 1 second with a useful resource that we found is w3schools.com/SQL. We also have support documentation on this, but really it does explain all of this in quite a lot of detail, the correct syntax, various methods and syntax and functions that you can use are all explained over here. It gives you example, it gives you exercises, it gives you access to sample databases, etc. So there's so much you can learn through W3 Schools, and this is free of charge. You don't even have to create an account. It is public tutorials, which is really useful. For example, if we click on the SQL select statement, it's going to explain how that works as well. So I just thought I'd show this to you if you're looking to get started, or if you don't have a developer within your organization. It is actually a more intuitive language to learn. But what I'm going to do is jump into the live example and show you how to use it within the Pluto LMS context. So back into the live environment, as you can see here, we've got a select query. So effectively what this is going to do is pull out various columns based on the information that you have here from a database that you choose. And you can also join other databases, and we'll dive into that in a bit. So in this example, really what we're trying to achieve is the username or the employee number that we've given them. We want to see their first name, we want to see their last name, and we also want to see their email address. So you can see that in plain English, that is shown over here. We also want to see their course name that they are enrolled into and the progress of that course. And when that course is actually complete, we want to see which day, month, and year they completed it. And the information we are pulling is from this database table over here, and we are joining two others. So I'm going to go into this slowly and explain everything. So to start from scratch, let's just first dive into the database structure of Pluto LMS. So there are various tables, and we are building more and more sample tables. If you do have any queries, or if you want to understand anything about the LMS database environment and which tables are available, or if you want to find certain information where to get that, feel free to reach out to us, and we're more than happy to help. But just to show you some examples, we've got prefix underscore user. So this is your user database. This is going to give you everything from the user ID, how they were authenticated on the system. We can, see their username, first name, last name, and all of the information that you can see over here. This is all information linked to the user themselves. In terms of the course database, this will just show you the list of courses on your LMS. Some of our larger clients have 300 plus courses on their LMS. So this will be all listed over here. You can see, the ID number, category, the full name of the course, short name, etc., start date, etc. And our support docs do explain how this all works as well. Then in terms of course progress, we can also see the course ID, the user ID, which modules were completed in that given course, the total number of modules, as well as their progress. So you can pull that directly, as well as their completion time. So I could keep going through the database, but for the purposes of this example, I'm going to show you how these are linked. So going back into the live example, really what I want to do is pull information from the course progress database table. So why do we say select and then we've got this information from? That's just the select SQL syntax. This is just choosing what are we going to use as our primary SQL table that we're pulling information from. So that is our starting point. And this as over here is just simply assigning an alias so that if we need to call a certain column from this table somewhere in our query, we can easily reference it using E. So we don't need to write out this full table name over here every time. For example, if we look at the table, we go to progress and we say E.progress, it's going to reference this column over here, which is named progress. So if we look at that, E.progress is referenced up here. That's how an alias works. So it's going to reference that column within the table. And often we need to join other LMS tables to our main table to make the information more valuable. So why do we join? So we're using this course progress table as our primary table. But as you can see here, we don't have the course name. We've got a course ID, and we don't have the username or the user email, etc. We've got a user ID. So we need to reference something that is common between all of these tables. So user, course, as well as course progress, we need to reference something in common in order that they join together. So if I look at the join over here, I want to join our LMS user database table. I'm going to give it the alias of U because later on what we're going to do is pull certain columns using that alias. I'll explain how that works later. So we've got the database table and we need to then join it to e.userid. So in other words, what we're saying is we're joining the user table to the course progress table, and the reference or the join column we're going to use is the user ID. So we need to reference e.userid. So if I go over here, e.userid is going to give me this column. And if we look in user, the ID of the user is over here. That's why we use u.id. So if I just go back to that, u.id. Now we've joined these two tables with something in common in order to effectively branch out the number of columns and create a new bigger table. So we are joining this information from course progress and user. So now within our query, our user ID has now got all of this additional information joining that table. We want to even go a step further. We also want to know the course. And in this particular case, we want to know the course name. So I'm going to reference the LMS course table as C because we use that later. I'll show you how that works. On e.course ID. So going back to course progress, e.course ID is over here. And then if we go to our course table, we want to join that with the course ID because we want to be able to access this information. So if I go back, what we're saying is we're going to reference e.course ID with c.id. So that's going to join those two tables, and now we've created one big table over here with all of this information. I'll show you how the filter works later on in this video. So now we've got this large table. You can say select and then use the star symbol to just bring in all of the information in one big table. The tutorials on W3 Schools do show you that. But in this particular case, we don't want all the information. We don't want to know the user's address. We don't want to know their phone number. We simply want to know their username, first name, last name, email, which course they're enrolled into, and the progress on that course, as well as when they completed that course. So this is where the select syntax comes in initially. So we can define the columns that we have that generates the table. So I want to take you to the end result so that this can make more sense. So if I click on View Report, this is the end result of the query. So we can see the username, first name, last name, email address. And as I mentioned, we joined all the information from the respective tables and we merged them to have multiple columns. So we made one bigger table. So this is the course name that the user's enrolled into, their progress, as well as their completion date. So if I go back to the custom SQL, I can reference you as the alias. That's going to reference my user table because user as you. And I can give that table a name. So that particular column a name. So previously you saw, if I say view report over here, you can see username / employee number. Perhaps I just wanted to say username. So I can clear that, save changes. Then when I say view report again, you'll see that the employee number is now gone. So if I click on SQL, custom SQL, I'm going back here. Now it's really important what precedes the full stop or the dot over here. So you're going to say u.username. Now u.username, as explained previously, is just going to reference the username within this table. So it's going to reference that column and pull the information from that column, u.username. And we're going to give that column a heading, and that is username. So you can follow our support docs to get the exact syntax. You can also follow W3 Schools. Secondly, we want to pull the username, so u.firstname as heading name. We also want to see last name as last name, email as email, full name as course name. So if we just have a look at that, now we're referencing the course table. So if I go to that, click on course, full name. I want to know the full name of this course. So that's why I'm referencing that as course name. Now we've got a little fancy function in here. It's just a rounding function. You don't need to do this, but we just want whole numbers. So we're going to round that e.progress off. Because if we go e.progress, and we click over here, e.progress, these are already rounded, but sometimes you might get a 13.5, for example, and you might want to round that up or down depending on your preferences. So that's why we use that function. Great, as progress. And then again, following W3 Schools and Googling, we can convert the user, so from the Unix time into a readable date format using this function over here. That will be in our support docs too, so you can have a look at that. And this is going to give us our completion date. And we can see by the syntax, which makes sense, D is for day, month, M is for month, and then Y is for year. And a common error is all of these lines within your SQL query need to end with a comma. That's just the correct syntax. So you see it ends with a comma. You can see all of these commas, except for the final line. So if you put a comma here and you said save changes, you're going to see an error, okay? And it's going to say there's an error over here. So if I remove that, the final line before your from does not have a comma. It should not have a comma, otherwise it won't work. So we're going to save changes and then that will work. Great. So now when we view the report, we've got all of that information over here. Let's say, for instance, I only wanted to see users that had the first name of site admin. Now, this is just an example. It's probably going to be a human name, not site admin. This is just a demo site. So what I want to do is go into custom SQL, and I want to add a final line over here. And I'm going to say where, and now I need to reference the correct thing. So I want to know the user first name, and I want to filter by that. So I'm going to say user, so u dot first name, because I'm referencing that column within the table, equals to site admin. So when I save changes, that'll work if you've got the correct syntax, and I view report, it's only going to give me the table output for site admin, as you see over here. So that's hard coding some filters. We can remove that if we don't want to have any restrictions. You know, if you go on to W3 schools and you look at where it explains how to use that, there's a number of other things you can do as well. Great. So we've saved changes and that's all great. Now, what if I only wanted first name, last name, and then course name? Well, what I can do is remove email, remove username, like that. And I just want to see that information. That's all that is important to me. Great. Save changes, view report, and then as you can see, username was removed and email was removed, and this table has now been narrowed down. That you can do as well. Custom SQL, let's go back. Great. So we're probably going to have a webinar in the future doing a deeper dive into this because we expect questions to come up. So yeah, we're more than happy to help you with where to find the information. Please do reach out to us if you require assistance, and we'll be more than happy to help. You will need some development knowledge. We unfortunately can't build these reports for you unless you can ask for an additional rate that we can do some consulting model with you to build out custom reports. But we are giving you full access to the platform to do this yourself. So final thing I did want to show you is using filters. So as you can see over here, when I view the report, there's this filter over here. So there's a couple of course names. Let's say I only want to view the topics format. So I can use this filter, select topics format and say apply. What's quite nice is it's a user interface. So now we can filter by the course name, and this narrows down the table for us. This is often useful if you only want to export certain information. You know, you click on export CSV and then it's going to give you the filtered output rather than the full table. If you don't want to build filters yourself, etc., there's a very simple workaround. Just export this to CSV and use the filters within Google Sheets or within Excel if this is too complex. So just going back a second, we do have this in our support docs and the syntax required, but what we've done is we've associated this filter syntax next to the CID just so that the system knows what it is filtering, so we can see that's been applied. If I took this out and I said save changes, the system is not going to know to filter by course. So if I say course and I go topics format and I say apply, you can see it hasn't narrowed down the list. It's because this very important piece of code is missing over here. So I'm going to save changes, go back, topics format, apply, and that narrows it down. Great. Very importantly though, To add a filter, you need to go to the filters tab and actually select that filter, and the support docs will show you how that's used. So you can't just add the code over here. You also need to add the filter. I'm just going to go there. So you also need to add the filter, and that you can do by the drop down menu over here. There are time filters, there's user filters, user field filters, etc. So that is available to you, and our support docs do show you how that works. Great. So as mentioned previously, you've got the report you need. This is exportable as well. So there's a lot of custom queries that you can do. Our support doc shows you how the database structure works. It gives you some sample guides to get started. But if you are having difficulties, please reach out to us. We're more than happy to help. Great. So jumping back into the webinar, we saw the sample output. We've spoken about that. So that concludes the webinar on reporting and best practices with reporting. Thanks so much for your time. So what we're going to do now is head into a Q&A session. And I see some messages have been posted already. I expect maybe a few more to be posted. So just diving into the first question, can you filter your site-wide 360 overview reports? Yes, you certainly can. So if I just go into the live LMS environment and I go to site admin, reports, and then 360 overview, what is nice is there are various filters such as, the time period, or maybe you want to choose a particular course. It depends by report. Often, if you have very unique filtering requirements, what you can do is, for example, under course progress, create various branches and filter by branch to only get the applicable information by branch. So this could be, you only want to see your marketing department, or you only want to see your sales department. That is possible in the 360 overview. Great, we have another question. Can you show me an example of how you would see a report within quizzes? Good question. So let's jump into the demo site. I believe there's a quiz in this course. Great. So proctoring quiz. There is an attempt over there. Okay. So if you go into the quiz, and you can actually click on results. So this is not a highly populated quiz. There's only one attempt, but there's various things you can see. So if I click on results, there's a lot of filters and criteria that you can set up. But if you scroll down, you can see the grade chart. Obviously, with more user information, you'll see more charts over here. And we will cover activity reports in a future webinar. So this becomes quite useful. Great. Question that's come up. Can I convert custom report tables to charts? Great question. Currently, our custom reports module is tabular, and then you can export that information, let's say, to Google Sheets and easily generate charts that way. We are working on building a chart module so that it's native within the platform. So that is on the development roadmap. Another question, in custom reports, what data do we have access to? So in theory, your entire LMS database. So if there is particular information you need access to that's not provided in the sample data that we do have available to you in our support docs, please do reach out to us. We'll be happy to point you in the right direction. Perfect. Looks like there's no more questions. Thank you so much for everyone that joined today. Really appreciate your time. If you do have questions, you can reach out to me personally at ian@plutolms.com or reach out to support@plutolms.com. Thank you so much for coming, and we'll see you next week, same time, for our next webinar.